Thank you all for joining us. The audio's a little janky. We'll make sure we fix it next time, but still, it's a very good episode. Please enjoy episode number 1. Thank you.
The Gen X Experience with your host, Mr. Perspective, and the preacher teacher, J. Rob. Welcome to the very first episode of the Gen X Experience, where two Gen X black men dive deep into the heart of politics and social action shaping our world today. I'm Mr. Perspective, bringing you the critical insights and thought-provoking viewpoints we crave. And I'm with the preacher teacher, J. Rob, here to break down complex issues with wisdom and clarity, making sure you leave no stone, making sure he leaves no stone unturned. J. Rob, how you doing, my brother?
All right, all right. Welcome to the experience, people. Glad to be here. Let's get going.
All right, so today we're going to kick off this first episode with the tale of the assassination attempt on the notorious Donald J. Trump. Because you know he's notorious now. You see the big memes, you see the 50 Cent, you know what I mean? J. Rob, what? Well, let me give the people the background. Donald Trump was in Butler, Pennsylvania, giving a speech at a rally.
Correct.
And during that speech, boom, 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 shots were fired. It was up to like, 6, 8 shots were fired at him. One just grazed him on the ear. You know, that one is circulating around. So I just kind of want to get your thought on this, on the assassination attempt.
Well, to be honest, there's always a bit of shock and surprise when that level of violence is perpetrated on somebody at that level. You know, you don't expect for a lapse in the security for a former vice president and a Republican presidential nominee. You know, it's not unprecedented.
President.
Former president, right? Yeah, the Republican nominee.
Now, don't go Biden on me.
I'm sorry. Did I say vice president?
Go ahead.
Okay. No, that's real. That's real. Listen, Biden is faster than me because at least he caught it and corrected it. So let's give Biden some credit for that. Yes, sir. Yeah. But no, but at the same time, I cannot say that I'm surprised. And what I actually thought about, to give a metaphor, is it really made me reconsider Malcolm X's statement when John F. Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963. For those in the audience who may not be familiar, at the time, Brother Malcolm X was the, I believe, Minister of Information for the Nation of Islam. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had sent out instructions from headquarters that there were to be no public statements about the assassination of the president. And of course, Malcolm X gave a statement, and he was quoted as saying that, you know, being an old farm boy himself, you know, chickens coming home to roost never did bother him. As a matter of fact, it made him glad. And so in that context, I thought about the violence that had been advocated and perpetrated going all the way back to 2016 at Trump rallies specifically. And I'm not trying to put the violence specifically on the right, or just to say that violence is specifically, you know, an issue with Trump rallies, but that was the context of the assassination.
No doubt about it. So, you know what's interesting? Well, hey, listen.
Right.
As you were speaking, what caught when you were saying that, I take it from the other perspective. I think this is the chickens coming home to roost for the liberals. They have been consistent, especially of late, in the fear mongering toward Donald Trump and what were you saying earlier? Project 25. He's coming. He's going to be a dictator. He's going to be a dictator. You know, the worst, most violent, most every negative, evil term was being pushed toward Donald Trump on the left. And it had literally just ratcheted up after he crushed Joe Biden in the debate. So that's just kind of my perspective the other way in terms of the violence. Has Donald Trump been violent? Absolutely. You know, he always says stand down and stand by, right? We all for that statement quite clearly. But I think in this situation, given this opportunity, I think the right, I mean the left has been really uh, verbose in their condemnation, but their violent fear mongering toward Donald Trump. What are your thoughts on that? Now, I do want to say
Mm-hmm.
that as we go into this, I I just thought about this, Juby, as we're having this conversation. Kind of, people can feel out your political leanings. Do you want them to
Right.
kind of feel out our political leanings, or do you want to give them an understanding of our political leanings?
Um, wow, that's a very good question. I don't mind sharing.
One, so I don't want to put a bias on it, but I do have a perspective. But
Right.
I want them to kind of figure out as they talk to us without kind of
I would
going.
just
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just describe myself in general as
Mm.
center left, just on the political spectrum. Anything other than that, I wouldn't ascribe to because, uh, I kind of pride myself on being logical. So if it makes sense, then I'm going to agree with it. I don't care what side of the spectrum it's on, but my leanings tend to be from the center on social issues. Traditionally the black community is socially conservative. And then of course, since the 1960s when we had the Southern strategy, which shifted the loyalty of between the two political parties. Black people traditionally, for the most part, have been left leaning on the political spectrum, and I fall pretty much up under that.
Somewhat, I'm similar to that. If it makes sense, I'm a rock with it. Is it whatever it is? If it makes sense, I'm a rock with it. But
Like for example, um, I am not a fan of the current Florida governor. Excuse me, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. Much of his platform I do not agree with, but I do agree with getting rid of no fault divorce. You know, I
yeah,
certainly agree with that. It makes sense to me. That part of his platform I support and don't have any problem saying that. Just like I don't have any problem espousing my differences, with the rest of his platform.
what was the saying? Fiscally liberal, socially conservative, right? And I think most
Well,
black.
to be honest, the fiscal part in the past I would say yes, but since I've learned a little bit about finance, I'm becoming more and more conservative financially in the way my perspective and view.
That's what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. That happens when you broke.
Well, and that's real talk. So thank y'all for indulging us. Like I said, this is the first episode, so stuff like that is important to kind of share out, in my opinion.
But
And
before we move on and get too far away from it, I want to just touch on something that you said about the atmosphere, and I agree. I don't think I could be honest and sit here and say that no, the discourse, the rhetoric from the left has not been. I don't want to say inciting, but it certainly is heightened. And but my perspective on that is the tone of political discourse, and that has been ongoing even prior to either one of these two candidates attempts. First to both of actually, one the current president and then the former president, but before their runs for the Oval Office, that tone in the political discourse had already been injected by both extremists on the right and the left. Now, one thing I think that is different in terms of what we've seen more recently from the right, you have the president of the American Heritage Foundation. And I only bring this up because it was just so alarming to hear that language when, and I'm paraphrasing his quote, but essentially he said, we are in the midst of the second American Revolution. And he said, which will be bloodless if the left allows it. And so, in so many words, that was almost like trying to punk somebody. And for a mature person, obviously you're not going to react to that in any physical way, trying to harm anybody. But I always think about the psychos, and I think the young man, maybe perhaps psycho is not the proper term, but I think about mental health issues and people who may respond to that type of language. And so again, I don't think that type of statement helped, and I think it served to further heighten, the hostility, I guess is the word I'm looking for, in the discourse.
and that was, let me see. I just pulled it up. So I couldn't remember his name off the top of my head, but Kevin Roberts. What was
Okay,
his name?
yes, sir.
spoke. It was Kevin Roberts, and he said it on Tuesday before this, right?
Right.
But that's you're spot on because I remember I was listening to a debate from Ronald Reagan, right? Ronald Reagan would be run out of the current Republican platform for being too leftist,
Oh, no doubt.
too leftist, and I think that is the crux of what we're dealing with. When you talk about what came before, it kind of started with the rise of the Tea Party initially. Remember with Rush Limbaugh, the
Yes.
Fox News, which was a stated agenda to remove or to get those Christian conservative voters, white Christian conservative voters, fired up, locked in into this spiral that they're chasing because that group, from their perspective, saw too many rights going to too many people.
Exactly.
And it felt left behind because they didn't have all the privilege that they were accustomed to. Because you got to think about this, to go back into the 50s and the 60s. Man, what a time to be white. Man, what a time to be white. And to have that kind of snatched away is kind of scary. What are your thoughts kind of on that situation, from that perspective?
Man, I'm so excited about this conversation. Because it's sparking thoughts as we're speaking. You just reminded me of Thomas Sowell, the black conservative, and in the sense that the plight of the poor white person and the minority and the black and the brown in this country really are the same. And while many white citizens do enjoy that privilege, there are so many more that for them white privilege is really a myth. And I think that the rise of the Tea Party, as you said, in that conservative movement, along with Fox News and its growth, that was part of the inspiration. But really, with the election of former President Barack Obama, that's when you saw the visceral response from that demographic because they were able to see daily in the news media this successful African American man who was not just successful because of his athletic feats and achievements, or because he was an entertainer and had some special talent like singing or dancing, but was just a regular guy who worked hard and was intelligent and worked his way to the highest office in the world, pretty much, or the most powerful office in the world at that particular point. And so I think that what I'm getting at is it's part of the deception that's played on the masses of people, both white and black. And so one of the things that needs to be discussed is the common plight of the poor people. I guess taking it back to where Dr. King was in 1968 when he was assassinated.
But that's the problem of the American democracy, right? Yes, we can absolutely unite on the fact that we don't have anything on either side. Even the people you think got money don't have no money, right? That is just an absolute fact. We do not live in an effective social democracy, but it's a social democracy that's divided along racial lines. And the
Exactly.
depending on those racial lines is critical to what we're talking about. So, for example, in Butler, Pennsylvania, Butler, Pennsylvania, what you saw at that rally was Confederate battle flags everywhere. That's not in Dothan, Alabama. That
Right.
was in Butler, Pennsylvania. So the problem with someone like Stoll, from my perspective, it isn't what he's saying. The problem is we can unite to move, but you're so beholden to that white identity because they talk about identity politics all the time.
Yes, sir.
They don't talk about it from that perspective of what identity are you holding to, and then what does the world look like if you let go of that white identity.
No, that's an excellent point. That's my criticism of Soul also. You know, he's very succinct in describing the degenerate nature of Black culture, but his critique of the mirror image of that, and like you said, that need to hold on to the white supremacist ideology is absent in his critique of the parallels between the two cultures, because that's the divide. That's the reason why, and that's the power play. And that's why, to me, and I've always thought this, while Donald Trump, or former President Trump, I should say, I feel was incompetent as an executive, I think his political genius is amongst the greatest in the later half, well, I guess I'd have to say the 21st century, because his ability to read the room, so to speak, and to honestly not hold himself to an ideology, but make politically expedient moves, like the image that we have here on the screen. I mean, that was political genius, whether you like Donald Trump or not. I have to give a man credit as a former football player. When you get your bell rung, everybody has a different reaction. Some people jump up and they still in the fire. Some people don't know what's going on. Some people quit in that moment. you know. And so I do give him credit, for having the moxie, right, after being shot in the ear, right, to realize that, hey, I'm gonna turn to this crowd and I'm gonna pump my fist. And I think that's, to kind of slide to our second topic here, to get into the media coverage, just to touch on it. I think that's one of the reasons why so many people are questioning the nature of this incident, because of his response. It was really the best unscripted response you could ask for.
I don't know. Listening to the audio, because obviously I've heard the full audio that they had available. Him trying to get his shoe on before he leaving.
Right.
If I'm Secret Service, I'm like, I'm dragging his butt through. Like, no, you don't got time to put your shoe on. You need to follow instructions, Mr. President. You know what I mean? Like, it it,
Yes.
it should have been more of that than him driving in that moment. So I don't know how much of a script it was, because it very much didn't sound scripted from that part. His awareness leads me to think he's used to being in high pressure situations,
Right.
which, as a businessman, he's doing tens of millions of dollar deals, hundreds of millions of dollar deals. He's been in pretty high pressure situations in his life.
Facts.
So that's kind of like that's kind of, I take a different approach to it. I guess that's why we on this thing. So let's get into the media coverage. In the media, President Biden, in order to get to his response, but I want to talk to his response from the media perspective, and others in the media did not initially call it an assassination attempt. What are your thoughts? Because that gave people kind of the feel, they didn't feel that right with that coming out. You know what I mean? That kind of goes into the reaction online, but that was a big issue in the media with them not initially calling it an assassination attempt. It made people feel a kind of way.
I certainly can understand supporters of Donald Trump being a little bit salty, because obviously, their figurehead was almost taken out. I mean, he was centimeters away from being killed on live television, and what a horrific, moment, just for human, beings that would have been, thank God that did not happen. But at the same time, my logical thoughts were, in those moments, you have to be careful what type of descriptions you or labels that you give to events before you have facts, especially when you're in those positions where you're going to be held accountable for what you say. And so, like for example, former President Obama said that although we don't know exactly what happened, and many in on social media and in the media, were kind of reading in between the lines and taking that, is he trying to say that it may have been staged, or is he trying to say he's not sure? I just took it as, you know, um, they don't know, and they don't want to say whether it was a conspiracy, by a group of people, if one person was being used as a puppet, or if this was just, a lone gunman, so to speak. So I think it was caution on their part, especially knowing that pretty much anything they said was going to be taken, as trash because of, the heightened tension in the discourse.
And I think you're absolutely right. And from that perspective, they were spot on not to use that language. But this is the problem. The problem is the hypocrisy of it, right? the media is known for its rush to judgment approach in situations that favor that whatever the ones they're choosing, right?
Hmm.
And we've seen this a million times. We've seen, um, you know, the black football head coach was fired. The white football head coach was released. You know what I mean?
Oh
They
yeah.
truly understand their language, and we know, especially a lot of the like CNN, which could be called, you know, DNN, the Democratic News Network. You know, for what they published out. Just like on the same side, we've seen the same thing from Fox News when something comes out that is anti the Democratic side. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So that's just kind of like my thought. What other anything else you seen in the media coverage?
Um, I thought they were bland. You know, they 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 tried to just stay in the middle. You know, they got a hot topic. They know this is what, the business is all about. If you are a correspondent, you want to get on the ground, you want to call your sources, you want to get information because this is the time for you to do business. And so I think that they tried to take a dispassionate, I guess would be a good word, approach to it, which I think was kind of empty. You know,
It did
um,
feel empty. It felt real empty, especially with honestly, you know, I wasn't alive for well, I was alive, but the attempt on Ronald Reagan's life,
right?
right? I was a young kid,
Yeah, I was in
but
fifth grade, fourth grade.
but I still heard about, what I mean, that was news for years,
Right,
decades.
right,
You know what I mean? Like it was big time news, and we haven't had that. So we thought we were, from the Kennedys to Robert Kennedy, the Kennedy's assassination, the
right.
all the assassinations in the '60s, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. You know, we
Mega
went from
Evers.
that,
Yes.
Medgar Evers, 100%. We went from that to there was a lull, right? And then boom, we had another very near killing, right? And then, it's 2024, almost, 40 something years.
I thought about that too, Marlon, and my thoughts were, and I mentioned this earlier in the broadcast. It's not typical or it's atypical in our lifetime to see the executive office being threatened with that level of violence. And I had to go back to Reagan and said, okay, that was the most recent one, the only one that I've been alive for, and so that's been literally about 33 years, 34 years since that happened. And being in the fourth grade, I think I was about 9 years old. I'll be 53 in a month and a half here, and so that's been about 34 more years since that happened. And but what I think has occurred in the interim is while the executives and save January 6th, the legislative branches typically don't experience that much violence. The political violence was still occurring on the street and in the language. And to go back to the Malcolm X metaphor, now I bring in the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and his confession that while, and this is, what he said himself, so I'm paraphrasing his own words, while he did not participate or was culpable in his own opinion of the assassination of Malcolm X, he did admit to participating to the atmosphere that was created. And so I think to take it from more recent events, January 6th, all the way back, to Reagan's assassination attempt, I think that there have been numerous acts of political violence that were devalued by the media. And I think, and I want to ask you, is this dispassionate response that you're seeing from the media and even by the average person on social media and their own platforms, is it a part of the desensitizing of the American public to violence, something that we talked about often in video games when we were growing up?
America is desensitized to certain types of violence, right? So let's say this was the assassination of, or the assassination attempt on, I'm trying to think of a black person without that. Oh, Ron Brown. Remember, Ron Brown was
Oh, yeah.
Secretary of First. Plane was crashed under very, very suspect circumstances. And there wasn't a big outcry. I'm not just talking about from the position, I'm just talking about from the death. of the black man. I remember that happening, and I don't even know why that had a big impact on me, but I still remember that to this day of him going down, and nobody had an answer. Nobody had an answer.
You know what, man? I have not thought about that brother and that situation in so long, but as soon as you said his name, I know exactly who you're talking about, and I do recall that. And you're absolutely right.
So, and I'm not saying he was the president, which from my perspective, I think people are very shocked and upset. I think people from what I've seen online, and they're just channeling it back into the election rhetoric.
Okay.
So that's from me what I'm seeing, because I think that's why you get so much traffic about it. I don't think this doesn't feel like the Kendrick Lamar Drake beef which just came up. That had a lot of traffic, but it was like more of a ooh like that was violent.
Right.
That was highly violent.
Right.
On I was gonna say on wax, but they don't even make CDs no more like that. But
Right.
you know, but what I'm saying is, I don't think people are desensitized to it. I think people are shocked, and they're also what I've seen. They're thankful that this didn't lead to an actual uprising, even more than what we saw in January.
Well, you know what? That's a good point. I think that's a fair point. And I was basing, my perspective just on what I've seen on my own social media timelines. And they tend to be more liberal, because that tends to be, my circle of people tend to be liberal. And so I did see what I would call a lot of dispassionate responses from people who are, opposed to Trump. And to be honest, it kind of reminded me of what you referred to. Obviously, when Ron Brown's plane went down, we didn't have social media to the extent that we do now, so there wasn't the opportunity, to see that reaction so quickly. But in similar circumstances, I've seen in this incident the left kind of react like I've seen the right react to George Floyd or react to any of the other killings of black people at the hands of law enforcement here in the past 5 or 6 years.
Man, and so once again, it gotta go back. This will be the title: chickens roosting. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Exactly.
Of that response, because literally because of what you're saying, and there are people deep in their feelings, and that's why they felt a certain way without the right media reaction, because they're like, why don't you care? Why are you saying? Why do you miss? There's tons of posts going on online with people on the left saying, why did you miss? Why did you miss? Why did you miss?
Exactly.
They feel like this was a case of, and this to be honest, some people feel like Donald Trump is a Hitler in waiting, and this is the moment, and the moment was missed, and now he's going to be that dictator unless something drastic happens. So, with that being said, was this an action by the left to galvanize their fan base to make sure they show up to the polls to stop Hitler's inauguration?
I tend to approach this organically, this particular incident. I just think it was the actions of, based on what I've learned at this point, let me say that, without any additional information at this point,
We have
my
very little information.
my preliminary conclusion, as they would say, is that that young man, he might have been radicalized online. Certainly, I'm waiting to hear the reports once they go through his, his computers and any social media or any, um, content he may have been consuming. We may get a little bit more insight into perhaps, him being radicalized. And I only mention that because he's a registered Republican, but then they also took time to mention that in 2021, he made a minor donation to a Democratic, organization. And
It
so
could
I
have
don't,
been a donation.
say again.
Don't know his finances. It could have been a major donation.
Now that's true.
Let's
I don't
call
know.
it.
Listen, judging by the weapon he had, he had to have a little cash somewhere because he had a nice rifle there. You know,
Well,
he,
we ain't got the conspiracy topic yet, but
yeah, yeah. So and so yeah. So I mean, again, I think the last thing I was saying in that subject, for one, I certainly don't think that it was an action by the left, because I think, first of all, Trump was like I said, Trump was actually, shot. And so this was an assassination attempt, in my opinion. Somebody was trying to kill that man and came centimeters away from doing it. But my thoughts are, if he had been, God forbid, murdered, that would have put the Democratic Party in an even worse situation. Because Donald Trump has some very loyal, followers. I mean, this goes beyond just supporters. He has followers. And I think his murder would have put us on the cusp of an American Revolution. The second American Revolution that gentleman from the Heritage Foundation was talking about, because I believe there would have been men who took to the streets seeking, vengeance for his assassination, if that had occurred. That would not have worked out the way a conspiracy theorist on the left side of the spectrum may have hoped, in my opinion.
I say just because you have that thought of how it's going to play out, people have the perspective on the other side. I saw something online from Andrew Tate, who said, first they try to cancel you, right? Then after they try to cancel you, they try to put you in jail, right? And if they can't do either of those things, then they try to kill you, right? And he said this long time ago, like even before,
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with Tate.
yeah, even before this happened. And so this gives the spin of that to those people, right? So, and that's the thing, that's the crazy thing about it, and that's why we're talking about it for so long. There are clear advantages on both sides for this assassination attempt, right? This isn't like we can see, when they do a investigation, they say
Mm-hmm.
who has the motives, right? They look for motives.
Right.
We can see motives on both sides of this. Even the person they picked gave a donation to uh, the left, the Democrat, and he's also a registered Republican. Who knows what that means? Did he register because Pennsylvania is a closed state and he wanted to impact the Republican vote and vote how he does in the general election? But besides that, what I want to touch on this. You said this earlier. When we get the information from his social media, who he is, what he is, we might not get that. And I'll be curious of how the people respond. Remember the kid in, not kid, he was a man. He might have been there young, but the Buffalo shooter,
Right.
right? He had reparations on his gun, right?
Right.
Here's your reparation, and he wasn't charged with a hate crime. They bypassed that. They bypassed how he was radicalized and what he was radicalized by on his social media. The same
Right.
thing, Dylan Root bypassed how he was radicalized online and how he was radicalized. And the people who radicalized both those young men have yet to be held accountable for that radicalization,
Right.
right? Some people could say even they were co-conspirators in an act of terrorism, which they should be. Same thing with the young man down in young white man in all these situations in Kentucky. They failed to release his information.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say we might not ever get what's released, depends on what that thing is and who or what that may cause. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's what feels nasty for that situation when you brought that up. That's what kind of drug my mind into it. Because for real, we have to really start dealing with how young people are being radicalized online and who's doing the radicalization. And we're not taking a proactive stance on that. We talk about the minds of young people. We talk about protecting the minds of our youth, right? This is a very important situation, especially when those radicalized people lead to violence and those people and organizations aren't being charged or aren't being put in the crosshairs of we need to be watching everything y'all doing from here forth. We need to put y'all on blast.
Right. Well, you know what, man? I think it's interesting. Perhaps we don't get that information because, and I'm speaking anecdotally.
Okay.
It seems to be a movement to do away with um, the hate laws. And so when you have clear instances like in Buffalo, where there was writing on the rifle that is indicative of racial hate, he specifically targeted African Americans while allowing white people to go free. I mean, I
Okay.
remember specifically the video. And so that is something that has stuck with me. I'm in the every time I go in the grocery store, you know me, I'm in the grocery store frequently. I'm
Yeah.
still thinking about somebody may walk in here and they want to shoot black people, and I'm black, so I got to be I got to be prepared for that, and that's a traumatic response to that experience. But what I'm saying is, I think, at least from my perspective, anecdotally, on the right, there's been a movement towards doing away with the enforcement of these laws, and what I think you're seeing in Project 2025 is the official platform to now take that step from not enforcing those laws to let's go and remove these laws from the books so that there is no legal standing. And so I
I
think that's
want.
part of that reaction. But I also wanted
Let
to
me go.
say too, the last
Uh-huh.
part, and this is where I think we're really in agreement, is I think the level of disinformation that is affecting the minds of not just young people, but all of us who are online is part of the issue. And I think that's why for the shooter specifically, you see he was a registered Republican, but then he donated to the Democrats.
I just no. You brought up Project 25. I didn't want to go too deep into that because I want to. I want us to go through the convention, and then I want us to revisit Project 25 after the convention, right? Because I think we'll hear a lot more the Republican convention, which is coming up this week. So I want us to hear that and then come back into Project 25, right? Because
Since you
what they
brought that
say,
up, no, I was going to say, since you brought that up, I heard some political commentators um, question how the Republicans may alter their platform as a result of the assassination attempt. Would they soften the presentation of the platform, allowing for more empathy and sympathy, for the president, and not dig in, so to speak, and take us out of the shock that we're experiencing right now, with some tough political talk? Or are they going to, go the tough route, continue what they were doing, and then get right back to that, the fisticuff, so to speak? So I think that's going to be key starting tomorrow.
yeah, no, 100%. That's why I said it'll be so much more richer what they say and what they don't say coming back off of that. You know what I mean? Without us diving into it too deep. But if we had to throw a prediction out there, because this is a show of analysis, the Gen X experience, which we won't get anywhere else. What do you think? What do you think will be the most politically expedient thing to do? What do you think?
In terms of,
How the Republican Party is
I
gonna
would,
come?
I would definitely want to ride this wave of sympathy. I think, along with the poor performance by the president in the debate, it's shifted the landscape for Trump. I think one of the first signs of political wisdom I saw from his team was keeping him out of the public after the debate and allowing what happened with Biden to stew. And for me, when I watched his press secretary, Sister Stephens, in her first news conference, and she was peppered with question after question after question, I realized in that moment that nothing was going to stop the media from focusing on that. Now, obviously, nobody suspected that an assassination attempt was on the horizon, and that would be the one thing to kind of throw it off. And so, yeah, and so they need to ride that wave, and the platform is already out there, and there was already some pushback, and they were already, the campaign, at least anyway, was attempting to distance themselves from some of the more alarming points in that, which is smart political play. That's what all parties do, So I think it would be a mistake to now turn into tomorrow and then just wholly embrace this platform in this particular moment.
Man, I mean, we can't have a podcast and go agree on everything. No, I just agree. He's in the pole position, so I mean, why ruin that? You know what I mean? You win it. You winning. Hey, listen, I'm in the front row. You got to come after me. You got to do something to shift. the thing. I should be the one trying to shift. I just need to ride. You know what I mean? So
Well, to play the devil's advocate, now that you mention it, I wonder if perhaps that approach might be akin to the Atlanta Falcons in the second half of the Super Bowl. Are they just trying to play prevent defense? And with that approach, are you leaving yourself vulnerable to progress that seemingly is innocuous, but then next thing you know, you look up and they're in scoring territory with a chance to tie the game. And so
yep,
perhaps, like you said, another way of looking at it, maybe they want to go straight into Project 2025, embrace it, and further ignite the fervor that may be stoked. And I think some of the more hardcore members of the right, that's probably how they're going to see it. Let's take this moment. Let's embrace everything that we believe. Let's take this revolution. As a matter of fact, they can say now that the left has decided that it won't be bloodless, and they can move forward.
you know what? I think, and I want to get to Biden's response to this. That's mentioned, but this has been a great show. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please come back and stay locked in with us, because we'll do this kind of commentary all day, every day. All right. One of the things that I just want to state: many people hear Project 25 and say, "Good." I think I'm not saying million, I mean tens of millions, maybe even half the American population. You know what I mean? Or let's say 40%. How many have identified others on the right? See Project 25 and they're not afraid of it like some other groups are, right?
Right.
So I just want to name that. I think that's important to bring it to this space. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Trump's response. I want to say whoever wrote that response that Trump gave, where he, thanked put wishes to the people who did pass away. It was so presidential. There hasn't been very many moments. Shout out to Donald Trump, in which I could say it felt presidential. But that response, whoever wrote it, felt like a presidential response. And throughout this, I think this team has been smart to make sure he's back on the road. Was seen walking on his own accord, off of the plane onto the tarmac, was showing that kind of strength of character, which is a stark contrast. Every time he shows strength, putting his hands up in the air, that defiance and that defiant mood shows a stark contrast to Biden's character. Because every time we hear him try to sound defiant, for somebody who, it sounds like he's yelling at you. Like, bro, I didn't even do nothing. I'm on your side. Why are you yelling at me? You know what I mean? It's just a difference in that. So I thought Trump's response was very presidential. What are your thoughts on Trump and Trump's team's response to this assassination?
Well, once again, I'm gonna have to agree. As a matter of fact, to be honest, his response was so spot on. It was the first time that I can recall that I suspected he didn't write it. I honestly don't think he wrote it. I think that, and I wouldn't hold that against him. Under the circumstances, it
For a
would make
reason.
it would make perfect sense that he would not write that response. Because I think privately he's probably in shock. The reality of what happened and what almost happened. I mean, it has to start sinking in as the adrenaline, has died down, and the excitement around you is kind of slowed down. You're starting to feel a little more protected, so you're not thinking about survival in that moment. And then you sit back and you think, how close to death, you actually came. And so what I suspect, and this is just my, thoughts, I'm not going to say opinion, but I'm just wondering, will we see some sort of visceral effect in his political performances moving forward because of some sort of traumatic response to what occurred? And I'm thinking along the lines, because Trump himself is what, I think he's 78, soon will be 79 years old. And so at that age, there tends to be a slower recovery to traumatic experiences. And again, just to balance that thought, which is why his initial response was so strong. And like you said, it was important for the team to show him walking, and moving to give the appearance that he's okay. But for me, I try to read between the lines because, I've been a fan of politics and been involved in politics. We're not involved, but observing politics, since the Reagan assassination, essentially the assassination attempt. And to me, that seems like political theater. And I'm just wondering, honestly, how is the man? Not the politician, not the former president, but how is the man? Because I know if it were myself, when I sit down and think about, man, somebody took off a chunk of my ear and it wasn't Mike Tyson, boy, that is not, that ain't nothing to play with.
Yeah, yeah. Not well. I was just gonna say, not even take off because he was that close to death. That
Yes,
was
sir.
a headshot. If he, what they said, if he was looking this way, if he had moved,
Whew.
it would have been ball game. In that moment, boy, I tell you.
And you know what? Just to
One
bring in my military experience, my first thought, because I was in the Army National Guard in infantry unit back in Tallahassee, Florida, Company A, 3rd Battalion, 124th Infantry Division, and I graduated from Infantry Training Center in Sand Hill at former Fort Benning, Georgia. Although that's the Confederate name, it still holds a special place in my heart because that's what it was when I was there. But it occurred to me that I don't know if this young man had any military training or not. I'm assuming at his young age that he probably had not. And it occurred to me that the reason for that miss, those few centimeters or that 1 inch, might have been from his lack of expertise in sight adjustment. Something as small as that, just being a little bit off on his sight adjustment. And I haven't shot a weapon, in a rifle of that caliber in some time, and certainly, the rifles now are more advanced technologically. But that thought did occur to me, because it was that close.
well, it's like anything, Julie, right? If it's 150 meters away, they saying he was right. 150 meters. That's not an easy shot to make. It's makeable, but it's not an easy shot to make, right? Um, but every meter that you are away, if your sight's off, it's gonna eat up that. It'd be
Exactly.
way off from that perspective. From people who are, it's a game of inches, especially in terms of marksmanship, right? In terms of marksmanship. So yeah,
150 yards or meters, that would be considered intermediate
yeah,
for rifle marksmanship in the military. 300 meters was for a basic rifleman, examination. 300 meters was the distance shot. 150 would be something that I'm confident, even at 2 decades away from my training, with a sight adjusted rifle, I'm hitting my target.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's also one of those things too, right? If somebody was going for death, right? Because it wasn't trying to hit a mass shot, and they knew you not, he was able to get six off, which is wild, at least six, which is wild considering all the snipers around and everything around him. That they was going for a headshot because you might not get a second. You know what I mean? You might only just get one because the trained snipers that are around you. Maybe you get two. You know what I mean? Boom, boom. But you might go bang, right? So I say that to say, how did this happen? I know we kind of deep into it because I think about Secret Service. If you use 150 yards or meters, I don't know which one it was off the top of my head, but I remember the 150 coming up, right?
Right.
I remember when I was in high school, President Clinton came to my school, and everything was shut down. Everything.
Right.
We could move. We could once we you set everything. Nope, nothing can move. We ain't care. If you got to go to a doctor's appointment. Nobody coming in. Nobody coming out until the president has exited the space. And this was for blocks. You know what I mean? Inside of a
Right.
city. So especially with that kind of open space, it ain't so many buildings at the Butler Farm, right? It
Right.
was to be secured. And that wasn't secured. That's mind blowing to me.
I
That's
heard a
conspiracy theory.
I heard a law enforcement analyst, I can't remember his name, on television today. He said the fact that the Secret Service had rifles pointed at that building prior to the shots being fired indicates that it was perceived in their advanced analysis as a weakness because it was outside of their perimeter where everything is locked down as you just described, and it was elevated. It was an elevated position. I'm beginning to wonder, based on that analysis, if there was some small distraction. Perhaps they just didn't see the gentleman until a muzzle flash, or maybe they were distracted. Were they on their cell phone? Were they watching the president speak? Were they wiping the sweat out of their eyes? Did a mosquito come? It could have been anything that distracted them. And I want to touch on this point. There's an interview that's making the rounds on social media of a gentleman, a carrot top gentleman, and he stated that he saw the gentleman climbing up on the roof and told local law enforcement that somebody's on the roof with a rifle. And initially my thoughts were, my God, how could they not react to that? But then the second thought was the Secret Service has snipers on the roof with rifles. So if I'm law enforcement, I'm aware of that. And so a citizen telling me there's somebody on the roof with a rifle may not register in my mind immediately as a threat, because I may be thinking that's Secret Service. This person doesn't know about that. I won't react to that. And even if I do I have a direct line of communication to the Secret Service? What would be the channel for me as a law enforcement officer on the ground to relay that information, to get it to the Secret Service agents that are on site? And this goes back to what we discovered, with September 11th. There are always these gaps in between the services of our government in communication. Those delays often, cost lives.
No, 100%. And I think we see it all the time in movies where, and sometimes I think it's a joke, but then I see stuff like this where you'll have one sergeant or commander who's in a space. He's like, "Well, no, the FBI comes in. I have jurisdiction. No, I have jurisdiction." There, they have these dialogues about who has jurisdiction where and
Right.
when, and how does that jurisdiction impact us? Are we being deputized? Are we being, put on the sidelines of this? And people are feeling the type of way, like, well, if I'm putting on the no, somebody came in with this jurisdiction hat on, Dixon, forget it. He come in on top, and then they're like, you know what? All right, you got this. I'm on the sideline. I'm hands off. I don't want to interfere with your investigation, which could cost me my I wouldn't say life, but cost me my freedom, right?
Right.
Because if you interfere with a federal blank and blank, that's going to cost you.
Yes, sir. That's a
So
good point.
so I don't blame that. My literally, and I said it's my second time saying this, but I really do feel this way. There aren't that many buildings on here that you can't lock down that space. If
Right.
you need a target trained on that, you can have that target, but I also need people in that space. I need to do a sweep, and we need to keep that space locked down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not that many. It just isn't. From what off the top of my mind, what I remember, because he was here, and maybe there were two or three buildings with the opportunity, if somebody climbed up on it, they could get a shot off from that
Right.
space. It wasn't that many. It wasn't that many. So I just, like I
No,
said, that adds
it
a lot of
definitely was.
weight. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
No, you got it.
No, I was gonna say it definitely was a failure of assessment and execution on the part of the Secret Service that was able to happen. And the question is, was it purposeful or was it accidental?
It's a big question. It really is. And for me, I don't know if we'll ever know, but I think we definitely need a full Senate hearing and investigation into this. We need, we need dang near the Kerner Commission. You know, we need to find out what happened.
No,
Somebody needs
I
to pay for
agree.
this. Somebody needs to pay for this. Somebody
And
dropped the ball. The ball was dropped, and we need to know who, and we need to know why. We can't let this just bypass. And it's actually incumbent upon Biden to show that much care into this process, which I think would add to his presidential, to his look. So it'll be a good look for
for
him
his
to go,
legacy.
for his legacy, and to go a long way, especially going into the election. He's like, nah, Biden took this. The Democrats took this real serious, and that'll die down some of that conspiracy on the other side, saying that we were a part of this. And if they got to go full bore, I think that would, if I were them, that would be my advice. Is you got to go full bore into figuring out who, what, and why, and name names, and give that this kind of level of care, and can't just brush it off.
You know what, man? I think that's so important. And transparency during this process is going to be critical to help quiet the fires of conspiracy that are already raging across the nation. The longer there's a gap in the information about the shooter and the circumstances surrounding, him purchasing the rifle and having access to the building, as you were just speaking on, and coming so close to killing the former president, as long as there's a gap in the information or a lack of transparency from the FBI, the Secret Service, about what happened, and even President Trump's campaign, his security detail in particular, because even this image right here, my first thoughts were they did a poor job after the shots were fired of, like you spoke on earlier, of getting him off that stage. He should not have been allowed to stand up straight. He should not have been allowed to walk off that stage. He should have been carried off because that elevates his profile. You can see from the video there were still shots at his head available as he was being escorted to his truck, and then he stood on the truck when he got in the vehicle and did one more. And so, if there had been multiple shooters, if there had been a group of people trying to kill him, because of the way that was executed, that would have increased the likelihood of him being injured further. And so, they got to tighten up on that. But all of those things lead to these notions of conspiracy. If they were really trying to protect him, why would they have let him, and so you are spot on. I'm in agreement with you once again, brother. This investigation has to occur. We've heard that it's already started, but the transparency is going to be important. They have to get this information out because anything that the government reports, there's going to be a group of people that are automatically going to disagree and say it's trash. And so you got to get it out there so it could be vetted by people who don't have a dog in the fight, and they can come and speak.
Nah, yeah, and I think that, well, when we talk about the Biden's response, I think that is his response for this, because everything he says, I'm not gonna lie, it feels empty without that language of accountability. Like, we're gonna find out, we are gonna get this right. This is important to our country. I'm the president, and this can't happen on my watch as president. I thought that should have been more of Biden's stance, and I didn't feel like I got that from him. What did you get from Biden's response so far and Biden's team? Just like we talked about Trump, what are your thoughts?
I've been an observer of Joseph R. Biden for over 2 decades because he was a strong speaker as a young senator for the Democrats in the 90s. And so the reason I wanted to contextualize my response is because I think it's the same reason why so many Democrats have been calling for him to step down. He just doesn't have the energy in his public appearances that he used to have. I don't think that he was lacking in terms of his internal resolve, any of those things that you just mentioned. I just think that he's just a tad bit slower than he used to be, not just in terms of his speech, but in terms of his, because he has a natural stutter. And so at this point in his life, that's working against him, a little bit along with his age. But the one thing I thought to myself that later he came back out and said, I thought he should have said initially, was that he was going to direct the head of the Secret Service to make sure that every available resource is given to the former president, kind of elevating his security detail from a nominee or former president basically to a presidential status. I thought about that myself. I would have said that in the initial response. But I just think Joe Biden is, and then also too, another consideration. I'm losing this election, according to poll data. I don't want to give this guy too much riz, as the young people would say right now today, by going a little bit overboard and being too demonstrative before we know actually what happened, because that could serve to work against you if, as the opposing candidate, you come out so forcefully, we're going to find out what happened, and A, you don't find out what happens, or B, You find out what happens, and it's some sort of, at this point, I don't personally think it was fake, but let's just say, that was in the realm of possibility. And then here you were saying, we're going to bring these people to justice, and you come to find out it was some plot. So you got to be careful with that.
Well, I was just going to say, but either way, I think it makes him more presidential. It takes some of the spotlight away from Trump if I become the head of this as president.
Right.
I'm leading the people. The nation is shocked by this on both sides. So I'm taking some of those people who I know who are against me on the Republican side, and they're like, "Holy shit, he really can lead. He really can take it." The nation on both sides is messed up around this. Let's not get it twisted. This isn't a simple thing. And we got to be able to see Biden out front in leadership position right now. But what it looks like Trump is out front leading this. And that's what you need to head off. I mean, if I'm on the other side of Biden and Biden's team, I think it's paramount. I think this could have been, if they use it right, a great opportunity on their side to really show the American people Biden leading the way.
Yeah, and the reason why I don't think he has it in him is because from the left perspective, with his debate debacle, that would have been another moment where if he was going to show that he still had that fire within him, and not in terms of his resolve, because I think in terms of his thinking, I think he's correct. He knows that I'm not going to quit. That's not the best option. People are not going to vote for Kamala over Donald Trump, and we cannot bring in the governor of California because it'd be too easy for them in the short amount of time to paint him as an ultra liberal. And so even though Gavin Newsom is really articulate and I think would be a strong candidate, especially in 2028, I think to throw him into the position of having to replace Biden at this point would be a disadvantage. And so my point being, I think Biden's thinking is solid, but just his ability to deliver is what's lacking. And that's his fundamental problem. And that's something that I don't think he has the ability any longer to overcome. In other words, you're gonna get what you got.
Bam. All right. So don't forget, while you're here, make sure you stay locked in. Hit the like button, leave a comment. It really helps out this channel. As you're coming
Yes,
with
please and thank you.
strong commentary from us. All right. Is there any other conspiracies? We talked about, whether it came from the left or whether it came from the right. We kind of talked about a lot of these. Is there any other conspiracy that you heard online that you want to kind of talk about?
Not that I can think of. No. But I'll be checking for sure.
Yeah, no, let's be honest about this. The Democrats did this. Excuse me. This was led by Joe Biden. They've been after him. They're trying to project Project 25 that, Trump is the dictator, but in fact, Biden has been the dictator the whole time. First, he wanted everybody to get the jab. He forced it. You either get this jab or you lose your job. Invading of medical security or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Locked us away, wouldn't let us go to work, see our grandparents. Total dictator. And now he's assassinated. He went after his political opponent, through the legal system and his DOJ, and through his party.
Mm-hmm.
Biden has turned America into a banana republic. And I don't want to say Biden because he's senile and barely has his faculties together. I want to say the neocons. I want to say the liberals, the Democratic Party, left and right, are trying to destroy our country and stop the savior, Donald Trump, from giving the country back to the people. Those are some of the conspiracies I've been hearing. What do you think?
Well, my pushback to that would be with the Supreme Court's recent ruling about presidential immunity. I believe if President Biden was truly seeking to take out his political rival, he would not have a 20-year-old non-military trained sniper on top of that building. He would have had a member of SEAL Team 6 that would have made sure that not only Donald Trump, but anybody else on his staff would have been taken out. And
from the confidence level we saw that stuff, it would have been very easy.
Right. and knowing full well that now he has political immunity. I mean, legal immunity, because he can make the argument that Donald Trump was an existential threat to the form of government we have, based on not only his statements but the party platform. And him saying that he wants to be a dictator and lock her up, and going after his political opponents, Liz Cheney. Recently, he said that she should be tried for treason. And so there are a number of public statements from the rights presidential nominee that could easily be interpreted as insightful and attempts to undermine our form of government. And with that much being said, in the Supreme Court's decision, I think it would be within President Biden's right to send a ranger, a battalion, to go ahead and take out our nemesis and preserve democracy and the truth of the American way.
You heard it here first. The Democrats are going to try to take out Donald Trump. They sent in their 20-year-old, and next they're going to send in the Rangers and knock him down. Oh my! No, awesome, awesome, awesome. Conspiracies are what they are. They're not to be dismissed because I don't fall into that category. We've seen too much over our lifetimes of what was called conspiracies come to light. And there's not all the time, but some of these conspiracies there's truth behind them, and we can't always pick and choose which one there's truth behind and which one there's not, because it's not just I know it's been used in media to say, oh, this is a conspiracy to knock down you know what is going on behind the scenes, right? Because it's all conspiracy until the information comes out, right? I think that's a very real thing. So, what's next for Donald Trump? We know we have the Milwaukee. I'm really excited to hear that because I think we're going to really dive deep into their platform and things they're talking about. Is Donald Trump going to announce a running mate in Milwaukee?
Some people suspect he was going to do that yesterday, but I certainly think he will. I can imagine that he wants to come out of the convention with that level of uncertainty about who his running mate will be, because that will draw attention away. Obviously not from the large story of the assassination attempt, but it would draw some attention away and start to take away from that story, because why is it that after the convention, post convention, you still wouldn't have a candidate? So I fully expect for him to make a decision. Now, will he make a decision by tomorrow? Probably not. Donald Trump is going to do it on his own time. The way his career, his business has been set up. He's been allowed, to be the final word, and so I think that's going to, play a part in it. I think he's going to, read the tea leaves, so to speak, and reconsider the candidate that maybe was at the top of the list. How does this event change that? You know, and so yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does. I think for President Biden, I do agree he has to be presidential, but I think in this instance,
Before we get to Biden, with one thing, I do want to ask you. Um, the names that I've seen bandied about for a potential running mate: Tim Scott, Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance. Those are senators, obviously, as you know, and North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. Who do you think of that crew would you bring on if you were Donald Trump? Or maybe you have another thought in mind.
for the independents, I would tap Marco Rubio. I think for independents, he's someone that they could consider to be stable and a suitable replacement if something were to happen to the president, if he had to stand in for him. I think if you're going for the ideologues in your party, J.D. Vance might be a dark horse pick. Um, you know, um, and so those would be my two immediate thoughts about potential candidates for Trump.
I probably would go with North Dakota Governor Doug. And the reason why I think he would be the best pick, in my opinion, is because of that business acumen. He's really done a great job in North Dakota in keeping that, turning around that state and bringing business to that state. Um, and I think that goes a long way with a lot of that. I think he would balance out Donald Trump really well, and there wouldn't be any questions around him. He would be a safe pick from a Republican standpoint. I mean, obviously, I don't know deep about it. I haven't vetted it myself, but if I just kind of do like a quick glance of it, a businessman, worth a lot of money, um, somebody that other Republicans can kind of look up to.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty safe with the base. Tim Scott. He's from our perspective. He ain't what he's not like us is 100% right, but there could be a little, but there could be a little pushback. Same thing with Rubio. I think there could be a pushback to have because they're thinking. I would imagine that the Republican Party, Donald Trump, is thinking, I need somebody I can trust in the next person be in this position for a while. I think Doug Burgum gives the Republicans the best chance to go beyond Donald Trump's presidency if he doesn't become dictator, and it it kind of sets them up for success. That's just kind of my thought. Somebody they can run with, somebody who they can feel safe with, and it'll add to Donald Trump's legacy as president. It's very important that as you coming off your presidency, that you have your running mate or your vice president next to you.
Yeah, I think all the reasons you just stated are the reasons why Trump would not pick him. His personality is not going to allow for somebody that solid,
I think
somebody, yeah, with that level of respect and integrity, who has their own reputation and legacy to consider. Marco Rubio, tiny Marco.
yeah,
He's already ridiculed Rubio. Rubio is in his place. He's popularly subdued, and he could help you maintain Florida because I think Florida is one of those traditionally red states that may be a little purple right now, especially with DeSantis and his pretty much lack of an agenda, and coming back to Florida with his tail tucked between his legs and not really doing anything about the home insurance crisis we got going on down here, and speaking out against recreational marijuana, which I think could be an economic boom for the state that potentially could offset the home insurance crisis if somebody was to use some creativity in their thinking about what to do. And so my point being is I think JD Vance is another one that is enough of a crony that in that vice presidential position, they'll do what they're told. And I think based on what happened January 6, 2021, they're looking for people in those positions who are going to follow orders. And so for that very reason, I think that may just eliminate the distinguished governor from North Dakota.
man, you switched my perspective. You know what I mean? Like I say, this is a perfect example. When I hear something that makes sense, it makes sense. I'm not gonna run away from it. You know what I mean? And with that being said, I think he has to go Tim Scott or JD Vance. I don't think Marco Rubio, because he went against him already, would be a
Mm-hmm.
smart pick for him because I think that goes back into some of the same stuff he went with before with Pence and all that, right? Because
Right.
honestly, let's be honest. If Pence decides to go a different way, Donald Trump's still president.
Exactly.
That's 100% going to be true. And he needs somebody who's willing to make that decision. And I don't think he would put Ruby on that spot. So Tim, all right. So I want you to call it. You got to call it first. Tim Scott or JD Vance? Which way you going?
JD Vance.
Yeah, I'm gonna say JD Vance too. But let me say this: Tim Scott would be the best lapdog he ever had if he picked him.
He would.
He would be the best lapdog he
Yes.
ever had. When you talk, I'm about to go Django Unchained. He would be Steven to
Oh
the
yeah.
18th degree. We would literally have to change his name to Steven Scott. You will lick the boot till they, woo-wee. Boy. And I'm not saying JD Vance won't, but lacking that whiteness, Tim Scott feels like he needs to make up that by being that much more of a bootleg. Um, because he won't have anything to do until time when you know Trump needs him, and he'll be there for it. I mean, he's proven. He's proven he's willing to go against his people in ways that are. Because it's one thing, and I'm not attacking the black conservatives. I'm not saying you can't be a black and a conservative. I'm definitely not saying that. That'd be crazy from
Right,
my perspective. But what I am saying is to actively pick policies, thoughts, and ideas that work against the interests of black people
right.
for the sake of being a part of the Republican Party.
Yeah, for political and personal gain. Right.
Yeah, not all Republicans, and not all black, especially black men Republicans do that for sure, for sure. All right, so I'm gonna call it two. I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go Tim Scott. I'm gonna go Tim Scott.
I think what happened yesterday is the reason why you won't see Tim Scott. I don't think the ultra right, the extremists, MAGA, could, especially after yesterday, could stand the thought of Tim Scott being next in line to the presidency of the United States. Whether or not he's going to carry their pail of water, I think that's pretty much certain. But just the idea that he would be one heartbeat away from being the president after what happened with Donald Trump, they couldn't stomach that because
Yeah,
they don't even want a Stephen Scott presidency as a possibility. You know, as appealing as that might be to him and some blacks who are MAGA, right? I don't think the rest of MAGA that you can stay in your safe little spot. We got 4 seats for you right here behind the president. As a matter of fact, I think that the campaign was lacking in some budgetary funds because they didn't have the typical black crowd back there because and perhaps now this make me think it might have been staged because the black people might not have been the correct crisis actors because you know when we hear shots we're not going to follow directions and sit still, we finna run.
we out, we out.
So they had to get them black people off the stage because they weren't going to do right with bullets flying.
All right, so Tim Scott, Secretary of Commerce.
I could go
Next,
for that. Yes, sir.
all right,
Definitely.
here we go.
Definitely.
But he will definitely be in the cabinet. I think all the people we're talking about, if they choose to, if they want to, if they don't want to remain in their Senate position. All right, so let me ask you this: do you remain in your Senate position, or do you go to the cabinet?
If I'm Tim Scott, I look at Kamala Harris and I stay in my Senate position. Now,
I would.
if he gives me a nice secretary position, depending on the department, I may have to reconsider. But you're under the thumb of the president when you're on his cabinet. And as a senator, you have freedom. And I think Tim Scott is not really in it for Trump. I think he's in it for Tim Scott. And I think if it's not vice president, I think you remain a senator and you continue your push as a nominee because you get more juice, you get more respect, you get more riz as an independent senator than fully being a cuck for Donald Trump.
Awful. Awful. I would, like I said, I fully agree. I think it depends on the position. I mean, you get an opportunity to be Secretary of Labor, the Secretary of State. You gotta take that. You just got to. You just got to. You'll be a fool not to. Secretary. They actually be the Secretary of the Department of Education. You can't take that.
Right,
Right?
because they're going to eliminate the department. You'll be the final secretary.
Might be something said for that. I don't know. But politically speaking, I don't know if that's going to elevate your career. So just that way. You know what I mean? I'm not a Tim Stephen Scott fan, but I'm going to say this. My brother don't take it. This is Martin or the agriculture either. Don't take either one of
That's a
those.
good joke right there, man. That's a good joke.
All right. That's it. We made it. We here. Podcast episode 1 done. The Gen X experience. How you feel?
I'm excited, man. Listen, I'm thankful for the opportunity. Just the fellowship, just to chop it up. But this is exciting, so I'm looking forward to what we're gonna do with this. So let's keep it going.
100%. Thank you all for joining us. This has been a great show. And this is just the first one, so it's only up from here. And this is already up there, for real, for real. So catch y'all on the flip. Don't forget, hit the like, subscribe, stay locked into us, and we're going to keep coming more and more and more. Catch y'all out. Peace.